Like I mentioned earlier, I'm a walker. For decades, I woke up at 6 a.m. and I walked the same route with my good friend Dorothy. I still walk with Dorothy, but now that I'm retired, we walk at 8. When you do that, though, you often walk past the same people at the same spots at the same time. Have you ever noticed that if you go out and do those sort of things? Our own Ronna Swift shared that in the summer she could hear me and Dorothy chatting as we walked past her house. Over the years, I felt a sense that all of us out there at 6 a.m. had this little early morning community, and all of us faithfully showed up. I never stopped and asked any of them their names, but we would nod and smile and say good morning. If someone was not in their spot, you wondered if they were okay. I began to care about these strangers in my life. A friend shared a similar but more touching story. She was a single mother, raising 2 kids by herself, and her son walked to school on his own each day. It wasn't particularly far, and her son was about 8 or 9 at the time. Unbeknownst to my friend, as he walked, he walked past an elderly gentleman's home. This man noticed the little boy each day. He began to make sure that he had his coffee and was sitting by the window so he could watch the boy approach. This ritual began to mark the start of his day, and it brought him some comfort and meaning. In turn, at the end of the day, he found himself still seeking that same spot to watch the little boy walk home. This pattern went on for a few years. The man never spoke to the boy, but for some reason, it gave him a small sense of connection. One day, the man noticed a car driving very slowly and very close to the sidewalk as the boy was passing. The man became alarmed, and he walked out his door, and he stood on his porch in full view of that car. Nothing happened. Maybe the driver was just looking up an address, but the man felt an obligation to ensure that this boy was safe. The boy never noticed his quiet protector. One day, my friend said they were walking past this house, and the man was out in his yard. "Hello," he cried. My friend greeted him in return, and he walked over and he introduced himself. After finding out that this was indeed the boy's mother, he told her of his habit of watching her son walk to and from school every day. They learned each other's names, and the boy was surprised that for the last couple of years, this man had been watching over him. So they vowed to wave to each other, and a new habit grew. Care that had once been hidden was now shared, as the boy would stop sometimes and chat with the man if he was out in the yard. The boy's mother would sometimes send cookies for the son to drop off. And now both were caring for one another. What had been unseen was now shared. But now, more importantly, it was doubled. I began to think about all the care that surrounds us that we might not even be aware of. It's truly a mystery, as there's things we can't know about. Like the reading I shared earlier, folks in yoga classes are sending their light out to the world. A farmer whispers a prayer to his crops to nourish us. Someone somewhere is writing the next big song, and I'm really sure it's Taylor Swift. But then there's the less grand, but just as meaningful support from folks we don't really know. The coffee barista that sees you walk in and starts your drink without even being told. The guy at the gym who smiles and waves and says, "I got you," as he checks you in. A person who leaves painted rocks for others to pick up on a nature trail. Everyone who has ever donated blood. My sweet husband, who shovels out the sidewalk on our entire block, not just to help the neighbors, but more for the kids who are walking to school each morning. Kids he doesn't even know. people who put out bowls of water for passing dogs. I always think that's so sweet. The volunteers who tend to the Marigold Mile. Do any of you here do that? I love that street in the summer. It brings me so much joy just to drive down that street. I have a friend, Shelby, who took the same on-ramp on Highway 441 in Northland Avenue as she was coming home from her gym each day. And the sun was often rising, and she felt, for some reason, that little hillside ramp was crying out for some happy daffodils. She got this burning desire to plant some there and have these bright flowers offer joy to people as they drove past. She called the city to see what it would take to plant bulbs on a hillside. Surprisingly, it was not a simple task. She had to apply for a permit from the state, and then another permit from the Department of Transportation, so that the officials could block off the ramp to protect the folks who were planting. And then, of course, there were all the bulbs to buy, but she did it, along with family and friends who helped. It's just a hillside. It's just flowers. And yet, the minute you see it, it takes your breath away. She took our breath away by simply doing something kind. As spring approaches next year, look for those flowers on that ramp. Know that someone you don't even know wanted to brighten your day. Our community is full of murals, decorations, gardens, sidewalk poetry. I have a poem in front of my house, and art that others create simply because they have to. And we live in a community that understands the importance of those offerings. We're the lucky receivers of those gifts. And I think this is important to acknowledge. People care for us, even people we may not even know. We care for one another collectively in ways that are quite a mystery, in my estimation. In the beginning of the movie, It's a Wonderful Life, we hear the desperate prayers going up from the residents of Bedford Falls, asking for help for their friend, George Bailey. Our friends and family think about us, even if we are unaware. We're not as alone as we sometimes fear. We're never alone. We're always in community with those we love, of course, but also with those who live around us. Cole Arthur Riley says, to be able to marvel at the face of your neighbor with the same awe that we have for a mountaintop or the sun shining. This manner of vision is what keeps us from destroying one another. And to be honest, within our divided nation right now, we all seem to want to find ways to destroy each other. Being prickly and angry with one another has become our new normal. And I began to wonder about random acts of kindness, meditation, prayer, and mindful compassion towards others, even to strangers. Does it make a difference? Last month, 10,000 monks were praying in Tibet for world peace, especially holding Ukraine, Israel, and Palestine in those prayers, but also extending those prayers to every single person in the world. They were intentionally praying for us here in this room. They were praying for you. And that's all pretty great. But truthfully, if I hadn't read the article, I don't think I would have known. Does group prayer, meditation, or singular prayer, does it do anything? Is there any power in it? People of specific faiths will adamantly tell you yes. And then be careful. You might get invited into joining their latest prayer chain. And I confess, I always struggled with that. Does praying for someone heal them? It seemed to me that God often just took them anyway. It seemed random to me and a bit privileged. Why did God bless one and not the other? Were they more faithful or were they more worthy? I couldn't make sense of a God like that. But over time, along with life experiences and maturity, I began to see that praying and meditating earnestly for someone changed me. It helped me to center myself. It gave me space to offer up more love and compassion. It helped me to accept whatever happened. And then by letting go of that control, letting go of the outcome I thought should happen, it offered me more peace. And that peace allowed me to be more present for the one I was praying for, because I was accepting what was. Thich Nhat Hanh says that whenever we join our palms together in a daily practice of meditation, clarity and understanding are produced. I'm always fascinated about the science behind our behaviors. I actually find science to be pretty holy. Did you know that when people act kindly towards others, our brain releases a hormone called oxytocin? Oxytocin promotes social connections with others, and the influx of oxytocin dampens the activity in our amygdala, the region of our brain that registers fear and anxiety. There's a mystery and a lovely holiness that happens organically when we offer kindness to others. Studies show that doing so actually reduces our fear and anxiety, but also the fear and anxiety of those we are kind to. And these calming effects reduce cortisol, which is our stress hormone. And this increase of oxytocin helps in keeping our heart strong, and it reduces our blood pressure. Why this isn't a prescription somewhere, I don't know. We actually feel better, and our body is healthier when we are kind to others. Being kind can be such a simple thing, but it's such a huge thing. At this very moment, there are more than 200 controlled experiments on humans, plants, and animals that suggest that compassionate, loving prayers or the intentional good thoughts of one individual towards another actually affects the other. These studies paint a picture of human consciousness that is maybe infinite. Studies show that our individual mind appears to be connected with all other minds, no matter how far apart. And surprise, as Jews, we have held to this idea with our belief in the interconnected web of life. A 2005 study in the Journal of Behavioral Medicine compared secular and spiritual forms of meditation and found spiritual meditation to be even more calming. In secular meditation, you might focus on something as your breath or a non-spiritual word. In spiritual meditation, you might focus on a spiritual word or a text. Participants were divided into groups, with some meditating using words like, I am love. And others were asked to meditate with words that described a higher power, such as God or the universe is love. Both groups meditated for 20 minutes a day for 4 weeks. Researchers found that the group that practiced spiritual meditation showed greater decreases in anxiety and stress and exhibited a more positive mood. And get this, they also tolerated pain more easily. Scientists who study prayer believe that people who pray or meditate are benefiting from a feeling of emotional support. They actually feel less alone. Imagine carrying a backpack hour after hour after hour. It'll start to feel impossibly heavy. But if you can hand it off to someone else to hold for a while, it'll feel lighter when you pick it up again. That's what prayer and meditation can do, says Amy Wolschultz, psychology director at the University of Denver. It lets you put down your burden mentally for a bit, and you can rest. Prayer and meditation fosters a sense of connection with whatever you may define as a higher power. Maybe it's nature. Maybe it's other people. But get this. It can also include the generations of people who have prayed and meditated before you, says Kevin Ladd, the director of the Social Psychology of Religion Lab at Indiana University. I like that. I like imagining that I'm standing on the prayers and intentions of my ancestors. I wonder if our sense of anger, our divisiveness right now as a nation has a lot to do with a lack of connection with the stranger or with the other. It feels like we've stopped caring. When did we throw in the towel and decide it's not worth our effort to be kind to those that we find difficult? Because science is telling us otherwise. Treating one another with kindness is very worth our effort for our own physical and mental health. We hold the power. It's in our own hands how we confront this messy world. So what if we woke up each day and decided to do at least one small act of kindness? How could that change our little corner of the world? How would that start to change the shape of our hearts towards those we currently find prickly and cactus-like? Collectively, I think it would make a huge difference. Tomorrow is the arrival of a brand new year, a chance to begin again. What if we actively decided to choose kindness in 2024? And I think it's going to be a rough year. It doesn't have to be grand acts, although if you can pull that off, feel free to do so. I know in the Fox Valley we have an active and compassionate community foundation that allows people to do acts of kindness in enormous ways, ways that many of us don't even know about, but add to our quality of life here. This congregation is a force of nature that creates more love and compassion within these walls, but also in other lives and spaces around this community. With our closest family members, we all know the feeling of that difficult kindness that Joel spoke about. Kindness offered with frustration. Kindness offered in the face of anger. And we often extend that very kind of kindness, especially with family. We do it because we love them, and we do it because we are loved. I also think there's an exquisite delight in small, spontaneous acts of kindness. An idea falls upon you, and it feels exciting and even a little bit crazy to do. But it can change everything, especially someone's mood. And here's the thing. It could be as simple as a compliment, or holding a loved one's hand, or a painted rock. Back when I was working as a hospice chaplain, sometimes I had some really lousy days. Families were fighting with each other, patients were struggling with uncontrolled pain. Once in a while, I would choose to do a random act of kindness just to sort of reset my day. I was in line at a drive-thru getting coffee, and the car in front of me was from a dealership that was actually owned by one of my patients' families. I adored this woman. She was so kind and positive, even with a very painful illness. The car in front of me was old, and dented, and rusty. The woman behind the wheel looked like she could use a free cup of coffee. But she was in front of me, so I couldn't pay for her. So I look behind me, and there's a lovely woman in a shiny new Lexus, and her manicured nails are drumming along to the beat of the song on the radio. And she doesn't look frazzled at all. But then I thought, well, you don't know her. Maybe she's going through a hard time. So I decided to pay for her coffee. The rusty car in front of me was at the window now, and I saw her digging around in the glove compartment and on the floor, and it looked like she couldn't find enough money for her coffee. I sent her a little prayer of comfort, and she finally pulled away. As I pulled up to the window, I quickly said, "I want to pay for that car behind me." And the server laughed and said, "That's so funny. The woman in front of you just paid for you." A stranger who looked like they didn't have much to share, decided to share with me. Kindness. It forms a holy connection every time it's offered. Every single time. Take that lesson home with you today. Hold kindness in your hands when you act. Hold kindness carefully on your tongue as you speak. Kindness is always a choice. So choose it. And go change the world. May it be so.